mic. Yeah. All I need is one mic. Yeah. All I need is one mic.
Hey everybody, welcome back to One Mic, where I watch shit so you don't have to. And today I'm here to talk about Season 4, Episode 2 of HBO's Westworld, entitled Well Enough Alone. Also, I did want to add, as I mentioned last week, that I'm going to read the episode description as well, because I feel like it kind of seems to be tying into the episodes pretty well. This is another short one. The episode description on HBO Max says, "I heard a fly buzz when I died." My guess is that seems to be referencing what happened to that deputy assistant, whatever he was, attorney general. I can't remember what his full title was, but I just remember the deputy assistant because Clementine wonderfully emphasized the assistant part, which I thought was really cool. But seems to be referencing him. He gets a fly to the eye that's delivered by Charlotte Hale toward the end of the episode. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit more in depth later. But I kind of want to start off with the fact that I'm already enjoying this season. You know, it's off to a great start because I think it's shying away from what I didn't like about the show, which was confusion for the sake of confusion. Seems to be shying away from that and giving us, you know, a little bit of information and answers as we go along. And I think properly carrying that balance between questions and uncertainty for the audience, but also, you know, giving them like this slow drip of information. That's how you do this. Don't have us wondering what's going on for like episodes and episodes and episodes and trying to make it as ridiculously confusing as possible just for the sake of doing that. It's incredibly off-putting. This season seems to be balancing that a little bit better after these first two episodes. So kudos to the show so far. But I think another example of that too is this conversation that Caleb and Maeve have on what we end up finding out is the train about this lighthouse. And he says, you know, are we going to talk about what happened at the lighthouse? And she's like, you know, we did what we had to do. I'm not going to, you know, retell the conversation. You guys heard it. But what I think is interesting about that conversation is the fact that I posed a question last week if that scene where we saw all of these highlights of Caleb, if some of that stuff was just stuff I didn't remember, or if it was stuff that we didn't see that actually happened. And it turns out that conversation, the lighthouse conversation that they had on the train, kind of lets me know that there are events that took place essentially in between seasons 3 and 4 that we don't know about yet. And I think that there's a lot of information to mine there that could be interesting to see come out over the course of the remaining, 6 episodes or so of the show, of the season. I have a couple of thoughts about that as well, but I just wanted to give that as an example of them giving out enough information to make me feel like they're not just toying with me and making me confused just because they get their rocks off on doing that. So I liked that scene for giving me a little bit more clarity. Like, okay, I know for sure there's events that happened between the two of them, involving the two of them, that we don't know about. And I think there's a whole lot to play with there, which I'm going to talk about my thoughts at the end. So moving on, I want to talk about where we spend our time this episode. We spend it with 3 storylines: Caleb and Maeve, William and Hale, and Christina. So I'm going to start with Caleb and Maeve. We see them go talk to the senator that we heard about last week when Maeve searched the memories of who was that? The people that were sent to kill her. The one the guy that was from the park that we recognized. When she searched his memories, she saw that William had interest in a senator as well. So they go to visit this senator and his wife, and they find out that they are now essentially not just hosts, not just any old hosts, but they're like upgraded super hosts that are a lot more difficult to kill and do not easily respond to freeze-all motor functions. I think the only reason they were able to get the one guy Maeve was able to get that one guy was because it was Maeve specifically. I think anyone else that wouldn't have worked. But we find out once she plays back his memories that William and Hale, we see William and Hale come and replace them. And then we also find out that there are, what was the number? 249 other hosts like him. And they're not clear on what that means, but I think it means that there are 249 other hosts in like various positions of political power that are placed throughout the country that are meant to help facilitate what William and Hale are trying to do. So that's pretty frightening. Then also we find out that the wife, the original wife, is stabbed by the host replacement, but she's kept alive. And Hale says something like, I have an experiment I want to work on, and you might be perfect for that. Let's put it with the rest of the livestock. I think that, I said I was going to talk about the flies a little bit later. This is that moment. I think I'm guessing this portion of the season, or what we're seeing with Caleb and Maeve and them, takes place prior to well, I know it takes place prior to, well, I don't know, but I'm pretty sure it takes place prior to the cartel guy from the beginning of last week, because I'm wondering if this experiment is the start of her, whatever this is that I think is happening with being able to use flies in order to manipulate or control humans. Because we saw that with the cartel guy last week. I think that's what they're doing with this deputy assistant this week. But then my question is, why do we have that? Well, not why do we have it. I can see a means to it, but I was confused on, well, I wasn't confused, but I was questioning whether or not the flies last week, whether they turned people into hosts or if they controlled them. We find out this week they are placing hosts. Like they're creating hosts and replacing real life people with host copies of those people. So then the question is, what purpose do the flies serve? If you can just kill someone and replace them with a host, why not pick one of those things? I feel like you don't need both. But maybe there's like a limit to how much longer someone can live if you do the fly thing. That could be the only thing I can guess. But it seems pretty clear right now at this point that we have William and Hale replacing high-ranking political figures with hosts that they can control. But we also have what I think is like this side mission of some sort for Hale, where she's trying to make these flies control humans. That's what it seems like is happening. What I thought was also cool about the whole host replacement thing is that the way William did the vice president. And I'm going to transition to that in a moment. What I also want to talk about real quick too, because I started off talking about Caleb and Maeve. They go to this opera house after they leave here, and they end up in this bar, and they have the lighthouse conversation that I mentioned earlier, and then we eventually see that they're actually on a train, and they end up in a park that William refers to as the Golden Age. Looks like a Roaring 20s themed kind of park. So it looks like that's where we're going to be spending some time. I don't know, over the course of the next few episodes or the rest of the season, whatever the case may be. But essentially it comes to light that William's plan here with replacing all of these politicians with hosts that he can control was to make sure that he got the authorization to build this new park on United States soil and not offshore. So that's what, again, like I like learning these things and not feeling like I'm sitting down going, we saw this, what does it mean? Here's my guess. A lot of this stuff is a little bit clearer, and I like that. Even though there's a ton of stuff that's still really left up to interpretation and a lot of questions that are being posed that I'm going to continue to raise. As far as William and Hale go, like I said, that plan starts to come into focus with the replacement of the politicians. I like William's long game in this episode. I didn't quite get it the first time because I watched these episodes twice before I hop on these videos just so I can have a clear understanding of what's happening. And I like the fact that earlier in the episode, we see the deputy assistant come to try to meet with William, and Clementine shuts him down. I love the yes, but do you have an appointment line? That was great. And then eventually the vice president comes out and he's kind of like, yeah, I know you've been trying to duck me. And this was my interpretation of this portion of the conversation between William and the vice president, was that William was ignoring everyone else on purpose to entice the vice president to come out there on his own with minimal security, and that would allow William to make the swap that he does with the vice president. So I like the fact that it looked to me like there was a long game here, and the show didn't just hold up this big banner that's like, hey, look what we did. They were like, they let you piece it together. And I thought that was kind of cool. We also learned that Hale is keeping the real William alive. Now, if you remember, we saw the real William killed by a host William. I think it was I don't even think it was in the finale. I think it was in like the post-credit scene of the finale, something like that. And we learned that he's actually been kept alive, and she's keeping him for whatever purposes. It might just be as a pet, just for revenge. But revenge being the fact that we know that who we see as Charlotte Hale has a Dolores what they call the little orbs that I forget what they call the little orbs that make up their brains, but that's actually like Dolores inside Hale. So interesting to see what's happening there. I don't know why she's keeping them alive. There was an interesting kind of post show where I think it was Lisa Joy was talking about how they do the makeup differently. Like if it's the real William, they make him look a little bit more gaunt, more wrinkly. His hair's a little messier. And then when it's like the host William, he's a lot more cleaned up, fewer wrinkles, hair slicked back, a lot sharper, doing that. And I noticed it before I even saw that. So like I think that's a nice, cool thing to let you guys know, or to let all of us know when we're seeing real William versus fake William. Lastly, Christina. She discovers that she did write a story that parallels this Peter guy's life. And the interesting part is that she reads an obituary where it says that he gave his money to this hospital, the mental hospital. And Christina goes to the mental hospital and discovers that, one, it's been closed for a very long time, and two, apparently his money was given a long time ago because there's an entire wing dedicated to him. So for this to be, I guess, face level, exactly what we're seeing, for that to be the case, we would have had to have money donation, dedication of wing, closing of hospital, and enough time having passed for the hospital to look the way that we see it over the course of like 2 or 3 days. So the timelines don't add up. Christina notices this. How is this possible? I can only guess that the real Peter died however long ago, and the one we've seen as a replacement host who has become something somewhat awakened. He's understanding the nature of his reality. And this, I think, goes into what I was saying last week about Christina being part of a simulation. Like she's the background character in her own story, in a different story. She's just someone who's there. And I think that there's a few things that I think are evidence of this. Like I said, Peter feels like he's in there and he's kind of like woke up, right? Christina's kind of getting there. She's noticing things that seem a little off. I'm noticing things that seem a little off. Every time she goes to work, I feel like I've seen like the same scene when she's like walking into the office, like the same people. And I haven't gone back to check this, but I feel like everything I've seen, like the people she's walking past, the directions they're walking, seem like I've seen them before. And then she comes across this homeless guy who mentions the tower. He mentions something that he can hear that only him and the birds can hear. And then when Christina gets to her office, there's a whole lot of dead birds outside, but no one's reacting to this. If I saw that if there's that many dead birds on the ground when you're going into work, I figure you're going to look around like, what is happening? No one else is responding to this. And I think Christina being able to see it is part of an indication that she's starting to kind of like wake up too. Because, the dead birds, like I bet they could have a line where she's pointing out like, look at all these dead birds. Like, you guys don't see these dead birds, and they all go, it doesn't look like anything to me. Like, I feel like that's what is a clue for us that Christina's world is not real. Like, she is whether it's a host, a simulation, virtual reality, whatever the case may be, her world is not real, and she's starting to come to that realization as Peter did. The question is, what prompted this? And then also, who is she based? Well, it's obvious she's based on Dolores, but like, to what end? So lots of interesting things, I think, with Christina that we're going to learn about over the course of this season. And then I'm also wondering about this, whatever this sound is that only this homeless guy and the birds can hear. I wonder if Christina's going to start to hear that sound too as she becomes a little bit more awake. And I wonder if this sound is maybe like maybe like a controlling kind of sound that maybe like it controls the characters within the simulation or something like that, but they can't hear it. But once you're kind of like start to wake up, you can hear it, and the birds can hear it. Like a glitch in the Matrix kind of thing. And maybe this sound that's used to control these people is being emitted from this tower. I don't know, just a guess. But I really like what we're seeing with Christina. I think it's going to be really interesting. We still have to see how Teddy is going to factor into this. But yeah, I think I've seen more and more evidence that Christina's world is not real. Also, something about her roommate seems off to me. Like, she calls Maya after, what was it? When she discovered that the hospital had the dedicated wing and all that kind of stuff, and she realized that the timelines were off. And she calls Maya. Maya picks up the phone, and she's framed from behind, sitting on this park bench. It seemed really ominous to me. Like she's like that park bench is positioned across the street from this hospital, and she's been like sitting there watching Christina this whole time. Something about Maya seems off to me. So let me see. Let me make sure I covered everything I want to cover here before I move on to my thoughts. So I talked about the lighthouse conversation. I thought that was good to give a little bit more information on what happened in this gap between last season and this season, as far as, in the timeline. Let's see. I talked about the upgraded hosts, William and Hale, and their plan to replace them and get this new park open. What's going to happen with this park? Let me know what you think in the comments about that. This Roaring Twenties park, that should be fun. Let's see. The long game on the VP, I really like that. The thing with the flies being used to control humans, I think, I think that's what's going on. So I talked about that. Real William being alive. So yeah, okay, I've covered everything. So I want to wrap up with a couple of thoughts real quick. I noticed last week, and I noticed it again this week, but this week I looked it up. Did anyone else notice that Tandy Newton's name is spelled differently now? It has a W in the first name, that is. An extra W. It has a W in the first name that has not been present for the entirety of her career. And I'm looking like, it's not spelled that way, right? That's spelled wrong. Like I looked at it, I saw it last week, I let it go. I saw it this week, and I was like, okay, I gotta look this up. Apparently the version of her name with the W in it is how it's always been, and it was wrong in the credits of like her first movie, and she just never corrected it. So she decided like, okay, I'm gonna go by the correct spelling. So that's why there's that W in there now, and so I can't call it an extra W, it's the W that belongs. But in case you guys didn't notice that, I thought that was a little interesting piece of information. How many times did she save Caleb? Like she saved him like 3 times in this episode. She references times that she saved him before. He seems like a liability at this point, but I also wonder, like, is it me or is it kind of obvious he's a host? Like, whatever happened, like, we had the flashback thing that I now believe is a flashback of what looks to be him dying during this war that they've been referencing. I don't know, it seems kind of obvious he's a host. Wouldn't be too surprising if that's the case. How is Bernard going to factor into all this? It's 2 episodes, we haven't even seen him yet. The story seems to have a pretty solid foundation at this point. Like, we know Caleb and Maeve are going to be at a new park. We know Christina's presumably in this simulation, presumably going to become more aware of that fact. We got to figure out what's happening there. We can see what's happening with like William and Hale. Like everything seems to be kind of in its own, on its own path, heading where it needs to go. Where does Bernard factor into this? I feel like it's right on the cusp of like too many things going on. I can handle it right now. I'm hoping that Bernard doesn't add more confusing stuff to it, but I'm looking forward to seeing him because we miss Jeffrey, right? And then lastly, Clementine. I loved how at the beginning we see William kill her, and then later we see that he's essentially repurposed her into an assistant of his who's completely badass. Like I said, I mentioned I love the yes, but do you have an appointment line? But I also like how the newer version of her seems to have almost kind of like glitches. Like she's not a completely fully formed good host yet or something. Like when she makes the comment to the Secret Service about how they're obvious, she does like these little very, very subtle kind of like little ticks with her face. I'm wondering what that's about. But whatever, even if it's not about anything, I think it's an interesting aspect to add to the role for the actress who plays Clementine. So that's all I got for this week. Let me know what you think about my theories in the comments. Let me hear your theories, and I'll see you guys next week for episode 3. Peace.